Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. Jack's accident Falco stood at the docking bay, staring wide-eyed at the gleaming spaceship in front of him, his heart raced with a mix of excitement and terror. He had finally graduated from the Cosmic Police Academy barely. While his classmates passed with flying colors, Jax had squeaked by on sheer luck and a few miraculous coincidences. Yet, here he was, a full-fledged officer with his first assignment: track down a missing pet rabbit, a teleporting rabbit, to be exact. The pet belonged to an alien dignitary from the Zenith Prime system, and though it didn't sound like the most critical mission, for Jax, it felt like a make or break moment. He could already hear the whispers of his academy mates echoing in his mind. Jax, the guy who chased a runaway hoverboard instead of the thief riding it, or Jax, the guy who mistook a navigation bot for a fugitive. But this time would be different. He'd proved he had what it took to be a real cosmic cop. With a deep breath, he stepped onto the sleek silver ramp of the patrol ship assigned to him. The doors hissed shut behind him as the hum of the engine kicked in. Zenith Prime awaited, with its bustling streets, towering skyscrapers, and, of course, one very elusive rabbit. As the ship glided through the stars, Jax tried to remind himself that this was just a simple retrieval mission. A rabbit. How hard could it be? He hadn't even met the dignitary yet, but he imagined a stern alien with a furrowed brow, clutching a picture of their beloved rabbit, ready to chew him out if anything went wrong. Simple, Jax whispered, tightening his grip on the ship's controls. Upon arrival at Zenith Prime, Jax was greeted by a sea of neon lights and towering structures that stretched so high they seemed to touch the planet's thick, purple-tinged sky. Hovercraft zipped through the air, and alien merchants haggled with customers over everything from holographic pets to portable wormholes. The city was alive, vibrant, and if Jax wasn't careful, a maze of potential disaster for someone like him. He scanned his communicator for the coordinates where the rabbit had last been seen. Sector 9, near a bustling marketplace. Without much of a plan, plans had never been his strong suit, Jax set off on foot, weaving through crowds of different species, from tall, slender Glavians with shimmering blue skin to short, stout Grundos that looked like moving boulders. His first stop was the exact place the rabbit had last teleported to, a small, cluttered pet shop run by a particularly surly alien who resembled a cross between a squid and a bear. The creature grunted, not looking up from the row of rainbow-colored birds it was tending to. "I'm looking for a teleporting rabbit," Jax said, voice full of forced confidence. "Belongs to a dignitary." "Have you seen it?" The alien's large, watery eyes slowly rolled toward Jax before giving a half-hearted shrug. "Lots of teleporting things here, officer." "Try being more specific." Jax was already sweating. He fumbled with his communicator, pulling up a picture of the rabbit. It was a sleek, white creature with long ears and a mischievous gleam in its eyes. The pet shop owner squinted at it and sighed. "That thing?" "Yeah, I saw it. Teleported right into my display case. Took me an hour to clean up the mess. It's probably hopping around the teleportation device factory by now." Jax thanked the alien and hurried off, a little too eager to leave. He had no idea where the teleportation device factory was, but he figured asking around might help. Unfortunately, his first attempt to get directions led him into an awkward encounter with a group of alien tourists, who mistook him for a local guide and insisted he show them around the market. By the time he extricated himself from their grasp, another 30 minutes had passed, and the rabbit was still nowhere in sight. Finally, after a series of wrong turns and misunderstandings, Jax found himself at the entrance to the teleportation factory. It was a massive structure, all gleaming metal and buzzing energy fields. The workers inside were too busy to notice the flustered cop wandering through their workspace, dodging teleporting crates and half-assembled devices. He was just about to give up when he caught a glimpse of white fur out of the corner of his eye. The rabbit. It was perched on a conveyor belt, looking entirely too comfortable for a creature that had caused him so much grief. "Gotcha," Jax muttered, lunging toward the belt. But just as his fingers brushed its fur, the rabbit winked out of existence, only to reappear 10 feet away on top of a stack of teleportation coils. Jax groaned. This was going to be harder than he thought. For the next hour, Jax chased the rabbit through the factory, ducking under beams of light, hopping over conveyor belts, and tripping over tools left carelessly on the floor. Every time he got close, the rabbit would teleport just out of reach, leaving him panting and frustrated. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, Jax cornered the creature in the middle of a diplomatic gathering just outside the factory. Dignitaries from all over the galaxy were mingling, sipping exotic drinks and discussing politics, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding around them. Jax, dripping with sweat and out of breath, stumbled into the center of the gathering just as the rabbit teleported into the hands of its owner, a tall, regal-looking alien with shimmering silver skin. "Oh, there you are!" the dignitary cooed, scratching the rabbit behind its ears as if nothing had happened. "Thank you, officer. You've done an excellent job." Jax blinked. "I have?" "Yes, indeed. We've been negotiating the return of my precious pet for weeks, and you've managed to resolve the issue in a matter of hours. Very impressive." Jax, still clutching the communicator in disbelief, could only nod. The dignitary smiled and patted him on the shoulder before disappearing into the crowd with the rabbit in tow. The entire situation had spiraled so far beyond his control that Jax wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Instead, he simply whispered, "I did it." It was only later, as he made his way back to the patrol ship, that the reality of his situation began to sink in. He hadn't really done anything right. The rabbit had practically caught itself. And yet, here he was, celebrated as a hero for his successful mission. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as hopeless as he thought. Or maybe the galaxy was a lot more forgiving than he realized. Now hailed as a rising star, Jax's next mission came with significantly more weight. His new assignment: infiltrate a galactic crime syndicate run by the notorious Gravulix, a figure whose reputation alone sent shivers down the spines of seasoned officers. Jax, of course, had never heard of him. The briefing was quick: blend in at a local marketplace on the outskirts of Zenith Prime, observe suspicious activities, and identify the criminal operation without drawing attention. Easy enough, right? But from the moment Jax stepped foot into the marketplace, things started to go wrong. For starters, the market was massive, a sprawling labyrinth of stalls, shops, and street performers. Bright colors and exotic scents filled the air, overwhelming Jax's senses. He wandered aimlessly, unsure where to even begin. After an hour of fruitless wandering, Jax found himself captivated by a street performer juggling glowing orbs in a hypnotic pattern. The crowd around the performer cheered and clapped, clearly enjoying the show. Jax, intrigued by the performer's grace and skill, inched closer, completely forgetting about his mission. The juggler, a tall figure draped in a flamboyant purple robe, noticed Jax's fascination and beckoned him closer. "You there, you look like a man who could use some juggling lessons." Jax blinked. "Me? Yes, you. Come on, give it a try." "It's all in the wrists." Before Jax could protest, the performer thrust a few orbs into his hands and began giving instructions. Jax tried his best to follow along, but his clumsy fingers betrayed him, and the orbs tumbled to the ground in a heap. The crowd laughed, and Jax felt his face flush with embarrassment. "Ah, don't worry about it," the juggler said, patting Jax on the back. "Takes practice. You'll get there." The performer's kindness caught Jax off guard. Most people tended to roll their eyes at him, but this guy seemed genuinely interested in helping him out. Jax spent the next half hour practicing his juggling, completely unaware that he was chatting with Gravulix, the very crime lord he was supposed to be investigating. Jax spent far too long chatting with Gravulix, laughing over his terrible attempts at juggling, all while completely oblivious to the fact that he was standing next to one of the most dangerous crime lords in the galaxy. The performer's easy demeanor put Jax at ease, and for a moment, he forgot all about his mission. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Gravulix's gang was moving crates of illegal goods, smuggled weapons, counterfeit galactic credits, and some questionable technology right under Jax's nose. As Jax tossed the glowing orbs awkwardly into the air, they began to fall, clattering to the ground in a messy pile. A nearby street vendor, startled by the noise, knocked over a cart of alien fruit, which rolled across the plaza, causing a commotion among the crowd. The chaos was instant. People tripped over the scattered fruit, and one of Gravulix's henchmen, trying to avoid slipping on the bright orange spheres, dropped a crate he was carrying. The crate cracked open, spilling its contents across the pavement. A highly illegal, highly explosive plasma charges. The sight of the plasma charges sent a wave of panic through the marketplace. Screams erupted as bystanders fled in every direction, and in the confusion, Gravulix's men scrambled to cover up their operation. Jax, still completely unaware of the catastrophe he had just caused, bent down to pick up the fallen orbs, muttering an apology to the juggler. But as he stood up, he noticed the sudden panic spreading through the plaza. People were shouting, running, and trying to get as far away as possible from the smuggled plasma charges now exposed in the open. His heart began to race. Had he caused this? The crowd surged, and Jax was nearly swept away by the rush of bodies, but through the chaos, he spotted Gravulix's henchmen frantically trying to gather the plasma charges and haul them back to their ship. His training finally kicked in. This was his moment to act. The problem was, Jax had absolutely no idea what he was dealing with. Instead of charging in, guns blazing like he'd seen in the Holovitz, Jax opted for his usual approach, wing it. He shoved through the crowd, heading toward the henchman, but tripped over a piece of fallen fruit and went sprawling across the ground. The henchman, startled by the sight of an officer suddenly flailing toward them, panicked and dropped another crate, sending more contraband scattering across the plaza. In the ensuing mess, one of the plasma charges was accidentally activated. Jax, now sprawled across the pavement, had a front row seat to the glowing, pulsing device as it began to heat up, humming ominously. "You broken bar, I think this thing's about to blow," Jax shouted, scrambling to his feet. His voice caught the attention of the nearby marketplace security drones, which hovered into view, scanning the scene. The henchmen cursed under their breath and abandoned their smuggling operation, bolting for their ship, leaving the plasma charges behind. Jax, still disoriented and covered in fruit, reached for his communicator to call for backup. But before he could get a signal out, the security drones locked onto the activated charge. In a burst of flashing lights and high-pitched sirens, the drones surrounded the dangerous device. They quickly deactivated the plasma charge, neutralizing the threat before it could detonate. The entire plaza fell silent, except for the soft whirring of the drones. Jax stood there, frozen, holding a piece of orange alien fruit in one hand and his communicator in the other. Gravulix's operation had been completely exposed. The remaining crates, filled with illegal weapons and counterfeit credits, lay scattered across the plaza, and Gravulix's henchmen were nowhere to be seen. Before Jax could process what had just happened, the juggler Gravulix himself sauntered up to him, clapping him on the back. "Well done, officer," he said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Looks like you've saved the day again." Jax blinked, unsure how to respond. Save the day? All he'd done was trip and cause a bunch of fruit to roll across the market. And yet, here he was, standing in the middle of a crime scene, with a notorious smuggling operation busted wide open. As the other officers arrived to secure the scene and confiscate the evidence, Jax found himself at the center of it all, once again hailed as a hero. A few days later, Jax was still reeling from his supposed success in taking down Gravulix's smuggling ring. The higher-ups at the Cosmic Police Academy had praised him for his quick thinking and his unorthodox approach to the mission, though Jax knew deep down that he'd just stumbled his way through it. But his newfound reputation as a rising star in the Cosmic Police meant one thing: more responsibility. His next mission came in the form of a high-stakes security detail at the Galactic Peace Conference, a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful leaders to negotiate a fragile peace treaty between warring planets. Jax was to ensure that nothing went wrong during the talks, a task that seemed far too important for someone like him. Still, he accepted the assignment with a mix of pride and trepidation. After all, he hadn't completely botched his last two missions, right? The conference was being held on the glittering space station known as Serenity 1, a massive, floating city in the stars. The halls were filled with diplomats and dignitaries from every corner of the galaxy, all gathered for the historic event. Jax's job was simple: patrol the area, keep an eye out for trouble, and make sure no one disrupted the peace talks. Things were going smoothly, for the most part. Jax wandered through the ornate corridors of the station, trying his best to look like he knew what he was doing. But as the day wore on, his nerves began to get the best of him. Every noise, every alien whispering in a corner, made him jump. He was terrified of messing up again, except this time, there wouldn't be any rabbits or street performers to blame it on. As the talks progressed into the evening, Jax found himself stationed near the Grand Banquet Hall, where a formal dinner was being held in honor of the diplomats. The room was packed with alien leaders, each one more important than the last, and the tension in the air was palpable. Jax tried to blend into the background, standing near the entrance with a stiff, nervous posture. He kept one eye on the dignitaries and the other on the doors, just in case anything or any out of the ordinary showed up. And then it happened. One moment, Jax was watching the banquet unfold, marveling at the elaborate spread of food from across the galaxy. The next, he accidentally bumped into a service droid carrying a tray of exotic drinks. The tray went flying, and before Jax could react, one of the glasses smashed directly into the face of the Orban Empire's lead negotiator. The negotiator froze, his once pristine robes now dripping with sticky, fluorescent liquid. A collective gasp swept through the hall as all eyes turned to Jax, who stood there, mortified. You broken bar, I'm really sorry," Jax stammered, reaching for a napkin in a futile attempt to clean up the mess. But the damage had already been done. The Orban negotiator glared at him with fury, and it was clear that things were about to go very, very wrong. Just as Jax was about to apologize again, the alarms blared. The hall plunged into chaos as the security systems went into lockdown. A group of assassins, disguised as kitchen staff, had infiltrated the station and were attempting to take out key diplomats to disrupt the peace talks. Jax, still holding the napkin, was frozen in place. The assassins burst into the hall, weapons drawn, and panic spread through the room. The dignitaries ducked for cover, and the guards scrambled to protect them. For a split second, Jax's mind went completely blank. And then, in true Jax fashion, he slipped on the spilled drink and fell forward, crashing directly into the lead assassin. His weight sent the would-be attacker flying across the room, their weapons getting out of reach. Another assassin lunged toward Jax, but in the confusion, one of the service droids rolled into their path, tripping them up. Jax, still disoriented, grabbed a decorative shield off the wall and held it up just as a blaster bolt ricocheted off of it, knocking the weapon out of another assassin's hand. By the time the dust settled, the assassins had been subdued, the dignitaries were safe, and Jax was once again at the center of the chaos, looking utterly bewildered. The diplomats, stunned by his heroics, erupted into applause. Jax could hardly believe what had just happened. He hadn't saved the day, he'd simply tripped, stumbled, and fallen into victory once again. As the dignitaries celebrated their survival and the peace talks resumed, Jax stood in the corner, still clutching the decorative shield. He wasn't sure how it kept happening, but somehow, every mission ended the same way with him as the accidental hero.